Hey everybody, this is Carl Krenzel from Carl Buys Houses. Just wanted to go ahead and give you a quick housing forecast for 2020. Realtor.com collected a bunch of housing market predictions that they put out on their website at Realtor.com. You can find it at their Realtor.com Housing 2020 forecast. I'm going to briefly go through this with you, and I'm going to explain what this means for you as a Tucson home buyer or homeowner, and give you some perspective on what this means nationally and then what this means down for you here in Tucson using Tucson statistics as well. Again, my name is Carl Krenzel with Carl Buys Houses, a local real estate firm. I buy properties here in Tucson. If you've got an unwanted property here in Tucson that you'd like to sell but you don't want to list, it needs a lot of work, give me a call. I'm definitely the fellow who's interested in buying it. So let's jump into this report. What they're talking about happening in 2020, they're saying that home sellers are going to remain on the sideline, but millennials, believe it or not, are going to be the ones who are going to be doing a majority of the buying in 2020. What they anticipate by the end of the year is the median mortgage rate to be 3.88%. The average median home price has increased 8%. And that the existing home sales have gone down in the last quarter to 1.8%. Home ownership across the United States is very high, 64%, and single-family housing starts have gone up 6%. Why this is important to you is because this is one of the primary reasons why we've been having so many homes go under contract so quickly. Now, obviously, there's a lot of economic perspectives. I'm not going to go through all of them. You could certainly go through the report and read it. I've read it for you, and let me just briefly hit the high points. What we're really talking about as some of the major factors that are going to affect the American economy, particularly when it comes to the area of real estate, really revolves around three things: monetary policy, employment in the United States, as well as consumer confidence. Now, when you think about these three factors, America's been doing fairly well, and Tucson has been doing fairly well as well. I mean, the monetary policy for the United States has been okay in terms of making sure that we keep our Federal Reserve strong and in line. The employment rate has been going through the roof, and consumer confidence, even this recent Black Friday was a record setter, and that has been historically a determiner of people and their confidence in the mood of the market. It's just people have a lot more money going into 2020. And so what we see here is simply this, that there is a lot of an inventory shortage. There's just really not a lot of property that is available. If we look here in the Tucson Multiple Listing Service, you can see that back in January of 2008, when the market was doing really well, it was the average MLS median sales price was $216,000. And that's when it collapsed. You can see how quickly, in just 4 years, you can see how it bottomed out at 122.9. And in the 7 years since then, the prices have continued to skyrocket. Why is that? Well, it's very simple. If you look at the amount of homes that are for sale, well, there's just virtually none. I mean, again, the same time period, it peaked out right around June, July, August or so of 2008 when there were so many homes for sale, 10,000 homes for sale. But now if you compare that to then, there's 4,000 homes for sale on the market. There's just not a lot for sale. So these inventory shortages are prevailing. And Gen X and boomers, they're the ones who are holding on to their homes. Why? Well, because honestly, affordability is a factor. Where are they going to go? And more importantly, if a Gen X fellow like myself decides to sell my home, I'm more likely to keep it and rent it out. And that makes it really hard for somebody who's trying to buy a property, and it creates this inventory shortage. And so you can see 50% of all the home mortgages that they're anticipating in 2020 are actually going to be made by millennials. This is a surprising factor. So when you see housing supply and demand and the home sales just really having a problem that they're having right now, it's primarily because of the affordability. And mostly people are starting to come to this realization that a lot of the things that they thought were true about millennials just aren't as true as they thought. You know, a lot of people tend to think that millennials want these little hip apartments here, especially in Tucson, if they're down by the university, and if it's not walkable, then they're not even looking at it. But the reality turns out that, guess what? Millennials want 1,800 square foot single family residences in the suburbs just as much as everybody else. And they're driving their kids to school and daycare and good elementary schools just as much as everybody else. You know, the truth is, it's true when they're very young. Millennials want to stay close to urban centers because it's hip, it's cool, it's nice to be able to go to, you know, the nice restaurants and walk home and get a cab or an Uber. But when you think about Tucson, it's very sprawl. Urban sprawl is a real matter here, and it's very difficult to do that. You know, and if you have kids or if you have a family that you're starting out and you're living in an apartment, it's difficult to afford it. It's difficult to find a place to afford. So what are they doing? Well, many times they're saving up their down payments because these kids saw their parents go through the Great Recession. Remember this, 2008? Remember how things were in the sales price here in Tucson? Remember how things were really high? And back in 2008, everybody was on top of the world. Remember here in Tucson how people were camping out? Well, they saw this period of massive equity loss, okay? And when they saw that, they knew, you know what, it's a good idea for us to start saving up our money. And so these millennials, we tend to think that they're drowning in student debt, they can't afford housing. Well, believe it or not, some of these millennials are very, very adept, very smart at recognizing the times and the signs. And what they've been doing is saving up their money. You know, a lot of people tend to have this belief that millennials are rooting for a recession, that they want these home prices to collapse again as dramatically as they did in these 4 years. But what you can clearly see is that the 7 years since then have been nothing but an up and up and up market. You know, it turns out the truth, you know, they feel the same way about the recession. They want a correction, of course, but they're rooting for the economy. You know, when you think about 2020 for buyers, you know, it's going to be a lot of opportunities, and you're going to have a lot of opportunities to get a new loan. Loan restrictions and interest rates are going to be lower, so it's going to help you buy more property. The problem, however, is for sellers, just because this is happening does not mean there's going to be more property for them to choose from, and what that really ends up being is a mixed bag of blessings. For sellers, you've got to think this through. In 2020, you've got to understand. For buyers, they have more opportunities to choose from. There's new home starts going up left and right. And if you're in Tucson, you don't have to look very far to find new housing. You know, so if you've got a property that you're trying to sell, understand that in 2020, Realtor.com is starting to predict that your prices are going to start to flatten. Right? That the more affordable homes are going to be the ones that are moving. The upper tier housing, aka the luxury market, is going to start to soften a little bit. Why is that? Well, because even though there's lower interest rates, that does not mean that people are anxious to take on a huge debt. Buyers actually are starting to look for the right markets. You know, they're flocking to markets with low barriers to entry. And if you look through Tucson, you know, if you look through certain areas, let's say, for example, you know, let's go to the University of Arizona area, right? Let's take a quick look at, say, University of Arizona. Wham! You'll see here, let's see how many current homes for sale are in the University of Arizona area. There we go. Total of 73 homes that are currently for sale identified in that area, and you can see that that is as low as it's been in 7 years. It's extremely low for housing in that area near the University of Arizona. Let's take a look at another popular East Side neighborhood, let's say Terra del Sol. Terra del Sol is a first-time type of neighborhood, but the problem with it is that nobody ever sells in this neighborhood. They stay in there until they die. So you can clearly see that this neighborhood right here has almost, 10 properties for sale? And they started from a high of 42, 44 back in January of 9. So you can see that there's just not a lot of properties that are available. So what they do is they go to areas that are fresh and newer areas. So you'll see this in an outlying area of new construction and homes that are being more affordable, like Sahuarita or other areas like that. You know, this for buyers is a great time because you can qualify for a loan very easily. The problem is that you're just not able to find what you want. And as a home seller, if you're trying to sell your property, you've got to get very, very adept at understanding what the Tucson real estate market is like, and you have to adjust your price. Now, a lot of people tend to think that there's wide variations in what the list price to sales price ratio will be. Let me just show you a real quick thing over the last 3 years throughout Tucson, what the average sales price has been. Now, if you look at all of the Tucson multiple listing service, regardless, let's say just single family residences, you can see that they get on average 98.9% of the asking price of a home. So they're negotiating about a 1%, 1.1% perhaps for a single family residence. How about townhouses? 99.2% worth of the asking price. They're not negotiating a lot. So when you do have to negotiate, understand that people don't make wild offers. You tend to think that, your buyer is going to offer you $10,000 less than your home price. That's not the case at all. If you're trying to leave room to negotiate, guess what? You've probably priced yourself out of the market. That is not where you want to be. Listen, the 2020 election is going to be a wild card. A lot of people tend to think that the election is going to make a big difference one way or the other. Honestly, it doesn't. Historically speaking, it does not make that big of a difference who is elected president. But who is elected Congress, Senate, your local magistrate? Yeah, that does make a difference because they affect your taxes in your area. So be sure to get out and vote in the Pima County elections. Be sure to get out and vote in the Tucson elections because those are the people who are going to affect you the most directly. It's not necessarily going to be the state government, although they will. It's not necessarily the federal government, although they will. The one who will affect you the most is going to be the local government, because the local city government enacts ordinances that will allow your city to grow or conversely allow your city to shrink and people to run away. So for example, if you look at these housing predictions by city, right? Tucson, if you look at this, Tucson all the way over here alphabetically, it's not in any way shaped by any other thing other than alphabetically. You can see Tucson, Arizona here is expected to have a 3.4% amount of growth when it comes to sales. There's going to be about 3% more sales in Tucson and 3.3% in terms of actual equity. Now, why is this different? Let's take a look at some of these other areas across the United States. Say Des Moines, Iowa, for example. They're going to lose 10% of their anticipated sales. Why is that? Well, because people don't want to live in Dubuque in Iowa, let's say. Let's take a look at Los Angeles. Lost 6%. They're expecting 6% fewer sales. Why is that? Because of the policies that they create is causing a lot of people to leave California and move to other states like Texas and Arizona, particularly Tucson and Phoenix, to get less oppressive taxation. So that is a summary when you start looking at the 2020 housing forecast for Realtor.com, along with the information from InfoSparks here at the Tucson Multiple Listing Service. I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, please share this video with a friend. My phone number here is 520-403-6227. Again, my name is Carl Krenzel with Carl Buys Houses, and this was today's Real Estate Update. Have a powerful day.